The transport ship descended through the thick purple clouds of Velcaris, and Lieutenant Marcus Webb pressed his face against the small window, watching the alien world emerge below. His hands were sweating despite the cool air circulating through the cabin. This was it. First official contact with one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Nervous? Claire Donovan asked from the seat beside him. She was flipping through data files on her tablet, reviewing Velcari customs for the 100th time. Terrified, Marcus admitted with a weak smile. You? Same. Claire glanced at Kevin Hayes, who sat across from them looking remarkably calm. The security specialist had his eyes closed, either sleeping or meditating. Probably meditating. Kevin was always the calm one. The ship shuddered as it entered the final approach. Through the window, Marcus could see the Velcari capital city spreading across the landscape like a massive organism. The buildings were organic in design, curved and flowing, built from some kind of dark stone that gleamed in the light of the planet's twin suns. Towers spiraled upward, connected by bridges that looked too delicate to support weight, but somehow did. Landing in 2 minutes, the pilot announced over the intercom. Marcus took a deep breath. He had been chosen for this mission because of his diplomatic record and his ability to stay calm under pressure. At least, that's what Admiral Morrison had told him. Right now, he felt anything but calm. The Velcari were known throughout explored space as fierce warriors with a strict code of honor. One wrong move, one unintended insult, and this whole mission could collapse. The ship touched down with barely a bump. Kevin opened his eyes and stretched. Ready to make history? Ready as I'll ever be, Marcus said, standing and smoothing down his uniform. The dark blue fabric was crisp and formal, displaying his rank and the emblem of Earth's diplomatic corps. The loading ramp descended with a hiss of hydraulics. Hot, humid air rushed into the cabin, carrying strange scents that Marcus couldn't identify. Sweet but sharp, like flowers mixed with something mineral. His first breath of alien air. They walked down the ramp together, Marcus in the lead as mission commander. The landing platform was enormous, easily the size of 3 football fields. Velcari guards stood in formation along both sides, creating a corridor leading to a massive doorway carved into what looked like a living mountain. Marcus tried not to stare at the guards, but it was impossible not to notice them. Each one stood at least 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in dark scales that shifted colors slightly in the light, from deep green to midnight blue. They had 2 legs and 4 arms, with the lower set of arms being slightly smaller than the upper. Their faces were elongated, almost reptilian, with 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern and mouths full of sharp teeth. Don't show fear, Claire whispered. They respect confidence. Marcus straightened his shoulders and walked forward. The Velcari guards didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe as the humans passed between them. It felt like walking through a forest of statues, except these statues could tear him apart in seconds if they chose to. Yet the doorway led into a massive corridor carved from smooth stone. Bioluminescent plants grew along the walls, providing soft blue and green light. The ceiling was so high Marcus couldn't see it clearly in the dimness above. Their footsteps echoed as they walked, following a single Velcari guide who had stepped forward to lead them. This way, humans, the guide said, in surprisingly clear English, though his voice had a hissing quality to it. The Queen awaits in the throne hall. The throne hall was beyond anything Marcus had imagined. It was a natural cavern that had been expanded and shaped, with pillars of crystal growing from floor to ceiling. Water trickled down the walls in controlled streams, feeding pools where strange fish swam in lazy circles. The light here was brighter, coming from large crystals mounted in the walls that pulsed with a warm golden glow. And at the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, sat Queen Jathara. Marcus had seen pictures and videos, but nothing prepared him for the reality of her presence. She was massive, at least 8 feet tall even sitting down, with scales so dark they were almost black. They caught the light and reflected it in rainbow patterns like oil on water. Her forearms rested on the throne's armrests, clawed hands relaxed but clearly powerful. Her face was regal, with those 4 eyes that seemed to look right through him, seeing everything he was trying to hide. She wore minimal decoration, just a collar of some silvery metal around her neck and bands on her upper arms. She didn't need decorations. Her presence was enough. "Ika, approach," she said, and her voice filled the entire hall without shouting. It was deep and resonant, commanding immediate attention. Marcus walked forward, Claire and Kevin slightly behind him. He had practiced this moment. He stopped at the appropriate distance, not too close to be presumptuous, not too far to seem afraid. He bowed in the Valkyrie style, hands crossed over his chest. "Queen Jathira, I am Lieutenant Marcus Webb of Earth. We come in peace and friendship, hoping to build understanding between our peoples." The Queen studied him in silence for what felt like an eternity. Her eyes moved from Marcus to Claire to Kevin, then back to Marcus. He could feel sweat running down his back under his uniform. "You are smaller than I expected," she finally said. "More fragile. The report said humans were weak physically, but I did not imagine quite this much." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, what can such fragile creatures offer the Velkari Empire?" Marcus felt his heart pounding but kept his voice steady. "Your Majesty, humanity may not have the physical strength of the Velkari, but we have survived and thrived through innovation, cooperation, and determination. We offer friendship, trade, and the sharing of knowledge. Different strengths can complement each other." The Queen's mouth curved slightly. Was that a smile? It was hard to tell with a face so different from human features. "Perhaps," she said, "you speak well for one so small. We shall see if your actions match your words." She gestured with one hand. "Rixall will show you to your quarters. You will rest tonight. Tomorrow, we begin discussions." A smaller Velkari, perhaps only 6 feet tall, stepped forward from the shadows beside the throne. "This way, humans." As they followed Rixall out of the throne hall, Marcus allowed himself to breathe normally again. The first meeting was over, and they were all still alive. He caught Claire's eye and saw his own relief reflected there. This might actually work. The next 2 days passed in a blur of meetings and cultural exchanges. Marcus found himself surprisingly comfortable in the palace, despite being surrounded by aliens who could crush him without effort. The Velkari were direct and honest in their dealings, which made negotiations straightforward. Queen Jathira herself attended most of the sessions, asking pointed questions about Earth's resources, military capabilities, and intentions in this region of space. On the morning of the third day, Rixall arrived at their quarters with an unexpected invitation. "The Queen wishes to show you our military training facility," the smaller Velkari explained, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "It is a great honor. She wants you to understand Velkari strength, so you know the value of our friendship." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "A military facility? That's quite a show of trust." "Indeed," Rixall agreed. "You should feel honored. Few outsiders have ever been permitted to see our warriors train." Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and caution. This was definitely progress, but it also felt like a test. We would be grateful for the opportunity. An hour later, they were boarding a transport vehicle that looked like a giant beetle, its shell gleaming in the morning sun. Rixall joined them, along with 4 Velkari guards. The guards were silent and watchful, their lower arms resting on weapons that hung from their belts. The training facility was located in the mountains north of the capital, built into the side of a cliff face. As they approached, Marcus could see Velkari warriors moving through combat drills on outdoor platforms. They moved with incredible speed and precision, their forearms giving them advantages in combat that humans could never match. "Impressive," Claire murmured, watching through the transport's window. They landed on a platform carved into the rock. The moment the doors opened, the difference in atmosphere hit Marcus. This place felt dangerous, charged with aggressive energy. The warriors training nearby stopped to stare at the humans, on their eyes tracking every movement. "Stay close," Kevin said quietly, his hand unconsciously moving near his sidearm. Rixall led them through a series of corridors carved into the mountain. The walls were rough stone, marked with scratches and dents that spoke of centuries of use. They passed training rooms where Velkari practiced with various weapons, their movements so fast they blurred. "The Queen will meet you in the ceremonial arena," Rixall explained. It is where our greatest warriors demonstrate their skills. They emerged into a large circular chamber open to the sky above. Tiered seating surrounded a central fighting floor made of smooth stone. But the arena was not empty. About 20 Velkhari stood scattered around the space, and something about them made Marcus's instincts scream danger. For these Velkhari were different from the guards and officials he had met. Their scales were scarred and marked, their postures aggressive. They wore minimal armor, and their eyes held open hostility. Rixal, Marcus said carefully, where is the queen? She will arrive shortly, Rixal said, but his voice had changed. It sounded uncertain now, worried. One of the Velkhari warriors stepped forward from the group. He was massive, even by Velkhari standards, with scales so dark they were nearly black, and a scar running across his face that had blinded one of his 4 eyes. So, these are the humans, the warrior said, his voice dripping with contempt. These soft, weak things that our queen wastes time speaking with. The guards who had accompanied them shifted uncomfortably. Marcus noticed they were glancing at each other, uncertain. I am Krathix, the scarred warrior continued, walking closer. And I speak for those who believe humanity is a disease that will weaken our empire. We mean no harm, Marcus said, keeping his voice level despite his racing heart. We seek only friendship. Krathix laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. Friendship? With creatures who cannot even defend themselves? He looked at the guards. Leave us. This does not concern you. Lord Krathix, the queen ordered us to protect the humans, one guard protested, and I am ordering you to leave, unless you wish to be branded as traitors alongside these alien sympathizers. The guards hesitated, then slowly backed toward the exit. Rixal tried to follow them, but 2 of Krathix's warriors blocked his path. Kevin, Claire whispered, her voice tight with fear. Ma, stay behind me, Kevin said, drawing his sidearm. But Marcus knew the small weapon would be nearly useless against 20 Velkhari warriors. There is no need for violence, Marcus tried again, though he could see in Krathix's eyes that words would not stop what was coming. No need? Krathix spread his 4 arms wide. There is every need. The queen has grown soft, speaking of peace and cooperation. She needs to be reminded that strength is all that matters in this universe, and you humans need to learn that you are nothing but prey. He moved with shocking speed. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next his clawed hand was reaching for Marcus. Kevin fired his weapon, the shot hitting Krathix in the shoulder, but the warrior barely flinched. His hand closed around Kevin's throat and lifted him off the ground. No, Claire screamed. See, Krathix threw Kevin aside like a broken toy. The security specialist hit the stone wall with a sickening crack and crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Marcus rushed to Kevin's side, but other warriors grabbed him, their claws digging into his arms. He struggled, but it was like fighting steel machines. They dragged him to the center of the arena. Claire, run! Marcus shouted, but she was already surrounded. Krathix approached slowly, savoring the moment. The queen thinks your species has value. I will show her the truth. I will show her how easily humans break. The first blow came from behind, claws raking across Marcus's back. He gasped in pain as his uniform tore and blood began to flow. The warriors holding him forced him to his knees. Please, Marcus tried to speak, but Krathix struck him across the face, splitting his lip. Eid's begging already? How pathetic. The beating became systematic and brutal. They took turns, their claws leaving deep gashes across his back, his ribs, his arms. Marcus tried to protect himself, but his hands were held. He heard Claire screaming, heard Rixal shouting for them to stop, but the sounds grew distant as pain overwhelmed everything else. Krathix leaned close, his breath hot on Marcus's face. This is what happens to weak things that dare to approach the strong. You humans are parasites. You will corrupt our purity with your weakness. Marcus felt his ribs crack under a kick. Blood filled his mouth. The world started to fade at the edges, gray creeping into his vision. Through the growing darkness, he heard a high-pitched alarm begin to wail. Claire had managed to trigger the emergency beacon. Good. At least someone would know what happened. Krathix snarled in frustration. Finish it quickly. The last thing Marcus remembered was the stone floor rushing up to meet his face, and then nothing but darkness and pain. Marcus woke to softness beneath him and pain everywhere else. His entire body felt like it had been torn apart and roughly stitched back together. He tried to move and immediately regretted it, as agony shot through his ribs. "Don't move," a familiar voice said. Claire's face appeared above him, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "You're safe now. You're in the palace medical wing." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Claire held a cup of water to his lips, helping him drink. The water tasted strange, slightly sweet, but it soothed his throat. "Kevin," he managed to croak out. "He's okay. Concussion and some bruises, but he'll recover. You got the worst of it." Claire's voice cracked. "Marcus, I thought they were going to kill you. There was so much blood." Marcus looked down at himself. His entire torso was wrapped in bandages that glowed faintly with a pale blue light. The glow pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Even through the bandages, he could feel the deep wounds across his back and ribs. "How long was I out?" 6 hours. The Velkari doctors have been working on you constantly. They said without their technology, you would have died from blood loss." Claire wiped her eyes. "The Queen arrived right after the alarm went off. She brought half her royal guard with her. You should have seen her face when she saw you lying there." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the door to the medical room crashed open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Queen Jathira filled the doorway, her massive frame blocking out the light from the corridor. Her scales had changed color, darker than Marcus remembered, almost black with streaks of deep red running through them. The Velkari medical staff, who had been monitoring his vital signs, immediately bowed low and retreated to the corners of the room. Claire started to move away from the bed, but the Queen gestured for her to stay. Marcus tried to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain. He knew showing weakness to the Velkari could be dangerous, but his body would not cooperate. "Be still, human," the Queen said, her voice low and controlled, but Marcus could hear the anger simmering beneath the surface. She approached the bed slowly, her 4 eyes fixed on him. Each footstep was deliberate, measured. When she reached his bedside, she stopped and simply stared at him for a long moment. Then her gaze moved to the bandages covering his torso. One of her large hands reached out, and Marcus could not help flinching slightly. But her touch was surprisingly gentle. Her clawed fingers traced the edge of the bandages, careful not to press on the wounds beneath. Her eyes narrowed as she examined the patterns visible through the glowing material, the claw marks that matched Velkari hands. The Queen's scales shifted darker still, and a low rumble came from deep in her chest. It was not quite a growl, but close. The sound made every instinct in Marcus's body scream danger. "Who did this, human?" The Queen's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried such intensity that it seemed to vibrate through the room. "They will be punished." It was not a question. It was a promise, a vow, and perhaps a threat to anyone who would dare harm a guest under her protection. Marcus swallowed hard. "Your Majesty, I don't want to cause trouble between your people." "Trouble?" The Queen's eyes snapped to his face. "Trouble has already been caused. You came here under my protection, as a guest in my empire. The laws of hospitality are sacred to the Velkari. They are older than our written history. To attack a guest is to attack me directly." She moved her hand from the bandages to rest it gently on the bed beside him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her scales. "I know it was Krathix," she continued. "He and his warriors have been taken into custody. But I need to hear from you what happened. I need to know every detail so that justice can be properly served." Marcus glanced at Claire, who nodded encouragingly. He took a breath and told the Queen everything, from the moment they arrived at the training facility to when he lost consciousness. The Queen listened in complete silence, her expression growing harder with each word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Krathix has opposed contact with your species from the beginning. He believes that any alliance with humans would weaken the Velkari, make us soft. He wanted to prove human weakness and turn my people against this treaty. He succeeded in proving we're physically weaker," Marcus said quietly. "No." The Queen's voice was firm. "He proved nothing except his own dishonor. In strength is not only physical power, Lieutenant Marcus Webb. Strength is also endurance, courage, and the will to survive despite pain. She gestured to his bandaged body. You live. You speak clearly despite injuries that would leave many Velkhari warriors unconscious. This is strength of a different kind. Marcus did not know what to say to that. The queen stood, towering over the bed. I will handle Krathix and his conspirators, but I want you to know something, human. I take responsibility for your injuries. You were harmed while under my protection in my empire. This shame belongs to me as well. Your Majesty, you couldn't have known. I should have known, she interrupted. I knew there was opposition to the treaty. I should have anticipated that some might act on their hatred. She looked directly into his eyes with all four of her own. I will make this right. She turned to leave but paused at the door. Rest and heal, Marcus Webb. I will visit you again tomorrow. We have much to discuss. After she left, the room seemed smaller somehow, less charged with energy. Claire let out a breath she had been holding. That was intense, she said. Marcus nodded slowly, then regretted the movement as pain flared in his neck. Did you see her scales? The color change? The medical staff said it's a sign of extreme emotion. Usually anger, but sometimes other strong feelings. I've never seen a Velkhari that dark before. Claire adjusted his pillows carefully. She's taking this very personally. Over the next few days, Marcus learned just how personally the queen was taking the attack. She visited him every morning and every evening, always bringing something different. Sometimes it was Velkhari, healing remedies, strange pastes or liquids that the doctors applied to his wounds. Other times it was food from her own table, delicacies meant to speed his recovery. But mostly, she brought conversation. On the second day, she asked him about Earth, about the oceans and mountains she had seen in the files. Marcus described the Pacific Ocean at sunset, the Rocky Mountains in winter, the Amazon rainforest. She listened with an intensity that suggested she was truly interested, not just being polite. On the third day, she told him about Velkharis, about the great crystal caves beneath the capital where her people had first evolved, talked about the 3 moons and how they affected the tides in the planet's single great sea. On the fourth day, she spoke about her mate who had died 15 years earlier, killed by political rivals who opposed his progressive ideas about reforming the Empire's rigid class system. I understand betrayal, she said quietly, sitting in a chair that had been brought in specifically for her visits. I understand what it is to be harmed by those who should protect you. When I saw you on that arena floor bleeding because of Velkhari claws, I saw my mate again. I saw the cost of hatred and fear. Marcus was sitting up now, his injuries healing faster than human medicine could have managed. I'm sorry for your loss, Your Majesty. Jathira, she said. When we are alone like this, you may call me Jathira. It felt like a gift, all that small allowance of informality. Marcus nodded. Then please, call me Marcus. The Queen's mouth curved in what he had learned to recognize as a smile. Very well, Marcus. By the 6th day, Marcus could walk short distances without help, though every step still sent dull aches through his healing ribs. The Velkhari medical technology was remarkable. Wounds that would have taken months to heal on Earth were closing in days. The glowing bandages had been removed, replaced by a thin coating of gel that absorbed into his skin and continued the healing from within. Claire visited him that morning with news. The trial is today. The Queen has ordered a public hearing in the Grand Hall. She wants you there, if you're well enough to attend. Marcus looked down at his hands. The cuts across his arms had faded to pink scars. Did she say what she plans to do with them? No, but the word around the palace is that executions are likely. Attacking a diplomatic guest is apparently one of the worst crimes in Velkhari law. Claire sat on the edge of his bed. Marcus, no one would blame you if you wanted them punished harshly. What they did to you was brutal. I know. Marcus flexed his fingers, remembering the feeling of being held down, helpless. But executions won't help build peace between our species. If anything, it might make things worse. Krathix has supporters. If he becomes a martyr, it could undermine everything we're trying to accomplish. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I need to be there. 2 hours later, Marcus stood in the Grand Hall, wearing a fresh uniform that Claire had brought from the ship. Kevin stood beside him, in his head still wrapped in a bandage but otherwise recovered. The hall was packed with Velkari from all levels of society. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. Queen Jathira sat on her throne, her scales their normal dark color but her expression carved from stone. On either side of her stood members of her High Council, Elder Velkari, who served as judges in important legal matters. Krathix and 19 other warriors were brought into the hall in chains. The chains were ceremonial, Marcus realized, because the Velkari were so strong that metal restraints would not actually hold them if they chose to break free. The chains were a symbol of dishonor, a public marking of their crime. Krathix's scales were dull, and his 3 remaining good eyes stared straight ahead. He showed no remorse, only defiance. The queen stood. Say and the hall fell silent immediately. Krathix, son of Vekra, you and your followers stand accused of violating the sacred law of hospitality. You attacked guests under my protection, guests who came in peace to build understanding between our peoples. How do you answer this charge? Krathix raised his head. I do not deny what I did. I acted to protect the Velkari from contamination by weak species. The humans are parasites who will make us soft, who will erode our strength with their talk of cooperation and peace. I regret only that I did not finish what I started. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some sounded shocked, but Marcus noticed that some sounded approving. The queen's scales darkened slightly. You admit your crime and show no remorse. Under Velkari law, the punishment for such a violation is death. Not just for you, but for all who participated in the attack. Then kill us, Krathix said. We will die as warriors, refusing to bow to your weakness. The queen turned her gaze to Marcus. The human who suffered most from your crime stands here today. By our law, he has the right to speak before sentence is passed. Lieutenant Marcus Webb. Approach. Marcus felt every eye in the hall turn to him as he walked forward. His ribs still ached, and he moved carefully, but he kept his back straight. He stopped before the throne and bowed in the Velkari manner. Your Majesty, honored council members, assembled Velkari, he began, his voice carrying in the vast space. I stand before you as someone who has experienced Velkari violence firsthand. I bear scars that will remain with me for the rest of my life. I could have died on that arena floor. He paused, ear gathering his thoughts. But I also stand before you as someone who has experienced Velkari, honor and compassion. Your queen personally oversaw my healing. Your doctors worked tirelessly to save my life. And in my conversations with Queen Jathira, I have learned about your history, your values, and your struggles. Marcus turned to look at Krathix. You say humans are weak. You say cooperation will make the Velkari soft. But I come from a species that spent thousands of years fighting itself. We had wars that killed millions. We created weapons capable of destroying our entire world. And we were destroying ourselves, growing weaker through endless conflict until we learned a difficult truth. He looked back at the crowd. True strength is not just the ability to destroy. True strength is the courage to build despite the risk of being hurt. The courage to extend trust even when you might be betrayed. The courage to seek peace even when war seems easier. You know nothing of strength, Krathix growled. You could not survive one day in our military training? You're right, Marcus agreed. I would fail your physical tests, but I survived your attack. I survived being beaten nearly to death by 20 warriors. And I stand here now, asking for something that perhaps requires more strength than swinging a weapon. He took a breath. Your Majesty, I ask that you show mercy to these warriors. Not because they deserve it, but because executing them will only prove Krathix right. It will show that violence is the only language we speak. And it will give his followers a reason to continue fighting against peace. The hall erupted in noise. Some Velkari shouted in approval, others in outrage. The queen raised one hand, and silence returned. You asked me to spare those who tried to kill you? Her voice was carefully neutral, but Marcus could see surprise in her eyes. I ask that you find another way to deliver justice. Exile them, strip them of their rank and honors, make them examples of what happens when the law is broken. But let them live. Show your people that the Velkari are strong enough to be merciful. Krathix laughed, a bitter sound. The human begs for our lives like a weak child. This proves everything I said about their species. No, Queen Jathira said, standing. It proves the opposite. She looked at Marcus with an expression he could not quite read. It proves that humans understand something we Velkhari have forgotten in our pursuit of martial strength. They understand that mercy can be its own form of power. She turned to her council. I have heard the testimony. I have heard the human's plea. Now I will render judgment. The queen's voice grew louder, filling every corner of the hall. Krathix and his followers, you are guilty of the highest crime against our law. You brought dishonor to the Velkhari name. For this, I strip you of all rank, all titles, all honors earned in service to the Empire. Your names will be removed from the warrior halls. Your families will bear the mark of your shame. She paused, and the hall was so quiet Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. And you are hereby exiled from Velkaris. You will be taken to the frontier worlds and left there. If you ever return to our core territories, the sentence of death will be carried out immediately. This is my judgment, honored in the name of the human who suffered at your hands. Krathix's eyes widened in shock. Exile was, in many ways, worse than death for a Velkhari warrior. It meant complete separation from their society, their culture, everything that gave their lives meaning. You will regret this, Krathix hissed as guards moved to take him away. Both of you. The humans will betray you, and when they do, you will remember my words. As the convicted warriors were led from the hall, Marcus felt his legs begin to shake. The adrenaline that had kept him standing was fading, and exhaustion rushed in to replace it. Claire was suddenly at his side, supporting him. The queen descended from her throne and approached him. You have given me much to think about, Marcus Webb. Perhaps your species does have wisdom to share with the Velkhari after all. The weeks following the trial passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations. Marcus's wounds continued to heal, the pink scars fading to thin white lines that would mark his skin forever. The treaty talks moved forward with renewed energy, and surprisingly, the incident with Krathix had actually strengthened support for the alliance among most Velkhari. Marcus had become something of a figure of respect in the palace. Velkhari, who had initially seen humans as weak, now greeted him with gestures of honor. His willingness to show mercy had resonated with many, particularly the older Velkhari who remembered their own history of civil wars and the costly lessons those conflicts had taught. Yet the treaty was finalized on a clear morning when all three of Velkaris' moons were visible in the daylight sky. The signing ceremony took place in the throne hall, with representatives from both species present. Queen Jathira and Marcus placed their marks on the document side by side, her clawed hand dwarfing his human one. This is more than a trade agreement, the queen announced to the assembled crowd. This is a declaration that the Velkhari Empire recognizes humanity as worthy allies. We pledge our friendship and our protection to Earth and its people. The crowd responded with a rumbling cheer, the Velkhari equivalent of applause. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had done it. Despite everything, they had achieved what they came here to do. That evening, as Marcus packed his belongings in preparation for the journey home, Rixel arrived at his quarters with a message. The Queen requests your presence in the royal gardens. She wishes to speak with you privately before you depart. Marcus found her standing on the same terrace where he had wandered that first sleepless night, looking out over the bioluminescent forest that glowed softly in the growing darkness. She turned as he approached, and he saw that she held something in her lower pair of hands. Marcus, she said, using his first name as she had grown accustomed to doing in private. Tomorrow you return to your world. Our formal business is concluded. Yes, Your Majesty, though I hope this is not the end of our communication. Jathira, she corrected gently. And no, I hope we will speak many times in the future. But there is something I must do before you leave. She gestured for him to come closer. The three moons cast their combined light across the terrace, making the scene feel almost magical. You taught my people something valuable during your time here, she said. You showed us that courage comes in many forms. That strength is not only in claws and scales, but in the willingness to be vulnerable, to trust, to show mercy even when revenge would be easier. She raised the object she had been holding. It was a small stylus, gleaming with an inner light. In Velkari culture, we mark our greatest warriors with honor scars. These are not the scars of injury, but symbols deliberately applied to commemorate acts of exceptional bravery. Marcus's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I'm not a warrior. You are more a warrior than many who claim the title, she replied. You faced death with dignity. You showed strength in your mercy, and you have bridged the gap between two species that might have become enemies. She paused. Will you accept this honor? It is rarely given to outsiders. In fact, you would be the first non-Velkari to receive it. Marcus looked at the stylus, then at her face. Her four eyes watched him intently, and he realized this meant something deeply personal to her. I would be honored, he said quietly. Remove your shirt. Marcus did as instructed, revealing the network of white scars across his torso from Krathix's attack. The queen studied them for a moment, her expression unreadable. These scars tell a story of pain and survival, she said. But they were given in dishonor. The mark I give you now will tell a different story. She stepped closer, and Marcus held very still as she placed one of her upper hands gently on his shoulder. With her lower hand, she brought the stylus to his skin just below his collarbone. It did not hurt exactly, but he felt a warm, tingling sensation as she drew a pattern on his skin. The design was abstract but beautiful, flowing curves that reminded Marcus of water or wind. As she worked, the lines began to glow with a soft blue light, the same color as the bioluminescent plants in the palace. This symbol represents a bridge between two worlds, she explained as she drew. It is ancient, from before the Velkari had space travel, when different tribes on our world first learned to cooperate rather than fight. It seems appropriate. When she finished, she stepped back to examine her work. The glowing lines pulsed gently, and Marcus looked down to see the intricate pattern on his shoulder. The light will remain for the rest of your life, she said. It is made from a substance produced by our bodies, harmless to humans but permanent. Other Velkari will see this mark and know that you are honored among our people, that you are under our protection. Marcus touched the mark carefully, feeling the slight warmth it generated. Thank you, Jathira. I don't have words adequate to express what this means. Then do not try. She placed her hand over his, covering the mark. Just promise me that you will remember what we have built here, that humans and Velkari can be more than allies. We can be friends. I promise. They stood together in comfortable silence, each watching the forest glow below them. Finally, Jathira spoke again. I lost my mate to those who feared change and clung to old hatreds. For years, I thought I would never trust again, never open myself to the possibility of true friendship with anyone outside my inner circle. She looked at him. You have reminded me that isolation is its own form of weakness, that opening ourselves to others, despite the risks, is how we grow stronger. You did the same for me, Marcus said. When Krathix was beating me, I thought that this was proof that humans didn't belong among the stars, that we were too weak to survive out here. But you showed me that we bring different strengths, that our compassion and willingness to forgive can be just as valuable as physical power. The queen smiled, a genuine expression of warmth. Then we have taught each other well. The next morning, the human delegation prepared to depart. A Velkari honor guard assembled on the landing platform, a sign of respect usually reserved for visiting royalty. Kevin and Claire were already aboard the ship, completing the pre-flight checks. Queen Jathira stood at the base of the boarding ramp, her scales gleaming in the morning sun. A crowd had gathered to witness the departure, hundreds of Velkari, who had come to see the humans off. Safe journey, Marcus Webb, the queen said formally, for the benefit of the watching crowd. May your return to Earth be swift, and your people rejoice in the alliance we have forged. Thank you, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, bowing in the Velkari style. The Velkari will always have friends among humanity. But as he straightened, she leaned closer and said quietly, Come back and visit when you can. There is still much I would like to show you of my world. I will, he promised. Marcus climbed the ramp and turned for one last look. The queen raised all four of her arms in a Velkari salute, and the gathered crowd did the same. It was a sight he would never forget. As the ship lifted off, Marcus watched through the window as Velkaris grew smaller below them. Claire came to stand beside him. "Look at your shoulder," she said, pointing. Marcus glanced down. The honor mark was glowing brighter than before, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "The doctors said it might react to strong emotions," he murmured. "You're really going to miss her, aren't you?" Marcus nodded. "We made history here, Claire. But more than that, I think I made a true friend." The ship broke through the atmosphere, and the purple clouds of Velkaris gave way to the black of space. Suddenly, the communications panel chimed. Claire went to check it. "It's a message from the Queen's personal channel," she said, surprised. "Marked for your eyes only." Marcus opened the message. It was brief but carried the weight of genuine feeling. "May you heal well, friend Marcus. And may those who would harm either of our peoples know this. We stand together now. Let them fear that unity. Until we meet again, Jathira." Marcus smiled and saved the message. Through the window, he could see a formation of Velkari warships taking up position around their small transport, an honor escort, guiding them safely to the edge of Velkari space. Kevin's voice came over the intercom. Captain wants to know our heading. Ready to go home?" Marcus looked at the glowing mark on his shoulder, felt the dull ache of healing scars across his ribs, and thought about everything that had happened since they arrived on this alien world. He had been broken and healed, had faced hatred and found friendship, had built a bridge between two species across the vast darkness of space. "Yes," he said. "Let's go home. We have a lot to tell them." As the ship accelerated toward Earth, Marcus knew that this was not an ending but a beginning. The alliance between humans and Velkari would grow and change in the years to come. There would be challenges and setbacks, moments of doubt and difficulty. But whenever those moments came, he would remember the Queen's words, the honor mark glowing on his shoulder, and the promise they had made to each other on that moonlit terrace. They stood together now, and that made all the difference.